Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This event is being organized in partnership with the Kingdom of Bahrain, with Tamkeen, with Global Entrepreneurship Network, with the Kauffman Foundation and the World Bank. This lunch event is part of the 2018 UN High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development, HLPF it's known here, which is, as you know, is playing a central role in the follow-up and review of the 2030 agenda. As a moderator, I'm not supposed to speak too long, but let me just quickly say a few brief remarks from an unlettered practitioner who can't even spell the word entrepreneurship. So just a few words about entrepreneurship and innovation. Entrepreneurship, as it's commonly known to many except me, plays an important role in creating jobs, driving economic growth and innovation, improving social conditions, addressing environmental challenges, and last but not least, enabling youth to turn their creativity, energy, and ideas into business opportunities. These are not my words, I hasten to assure you. They come from a resolution adopted by the General Assembly in December 2014 at the very end of the discussion on the post-2015 development agenda. And therefore, it comes as no surprise that in adopting the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, the UN has strongly endorsed entrepreneurship as an important means of accelerating the implementation of the SDGs. What about innovation, which is a key word in the title of our gathering today? I was looking for a definition that made sense to me. And I found this one in a brochure that I picked by chance last week in one of the UN conference rooms where an HLPF side event was taking place. I was looking for it, I couldn't find it, so believe me, I copied it. It said, innovation from a development perspective is a new solution with transformative ability to accelerate impact. It is fueled by science and technology and entails improved ways of working with new and diverse partners. It provides sustainable, inclusive, and scalable solutions to the world's complex development problems. To further elucidate the role of entrepreneurship and innovation in facilitating the attainment of the SDG, we asked our group of distinguished panelists that we've assembled for you two questions, or at least to address two questions. The first is, how can entrepreneurship and innovation support in practice the achievement of the 2030 agenda? The second is, what can governments and other key stakeholders do to enable dreamers to become creators and innovators and come up with inclusive solutions to address development challenges? These questions will be soon displayed on the video screens that you see near you. Before I share with you the process of how we're going to organize ourselves, and before I invite the panel to sit at the table, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Ms. Safa Sharif Abdul Khaliq. She is the manager of corporate planning at Tamkeen, one of our partners, to give a brief welcoming remarks. And stay where you are. After that, we will watch a very brief 6-minute, 5-minute video on the work of Tamkeen. So it's my pleasure to give now the podium to Ms. Abdul Khaliq. You have the floor, ma'am.
Ladies and gentlemen, our distinguished guests, A very good evening. Representing Tamkeen Labour Fund, my name is Safa Abdel Khaliq. I would like to start by thanking all of you for joining us at this very important event under the theme of fostering entrepreneurship and innovation to achieve sustainable development goals. This event comes very much in line with the country's growing interest to expand investment in entrepreneurship by facilitating specially designed initiatives and support in catalyzing Bahraini companies to place them on a global platform, and by doing so, allow the nation to achieve its goals to develop a knowledge-based economy built around human capital and innovation. The theme, ladies and gentlemen, clearly indicates that the global goals have always been a part and parcel and an inclusive agenda of the country's development plans, where the country has already taken vital steps to achieve them in various areas through various strategic initiatives and projects, and have already reported success in implementing projects that achieve the agreed upon goals, representing key components of the Bahrain Economic Vision 2030. And a notable example of a national initiative that was created in Bahrain, positioning it as a vehicle to achieve multiple SDG objectives and associated goals, is through the launch of Tamkeen, or the Labour Fund, that was established in 2006 as part of the country's national reform initiatives, with a key mandate of empowering people and the private sector, and of course, promoting entrepreneurship. Gathered here today on behalf of Tamkeen, I take this opportunity to thank all our partners, the International Peace Institute, of course, for hosting us, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, the World Bank Group, and the Kauffman Foundation for accepting our invitation and joining us today at the panel discussion to shed light on the various reforms, policies, and initiatives that actually shed light on the efforts in supporting entrepreneurship around the world with the objective of achieving economic and social impact on individuals and businesses through embedding the concepts of the global goals. Thank you all for your efforts to enhance the entrepreneurial ecosystem in countries around the world and to provide a platform for knowledge sharing across various promising economic fields. Finally, it's my utmost honor to transition this session to the moderator of this event, Dr. Yusuf Mahmoud, Senior Advisor at the International Peace Institute, who will explain more about the event objectives, the outcome of the event, and the structure for today's session. Thank you all very much, and wishing you a pleasant evening.
In the last decade, the Kingdom of Bahrain has taken major steps to present a unique experience of total development and introduce inclusive reforms in accordance with Bahrain's Economic Vision 2030 and its guiding principles of sustainability, competitiveness, and fairness. Tamkeen, the Labour Fund, is a key reform initiative that was established in 2006 with the aim to invest in the development of human resources and economic growth. Tamkeen is recognized today as a national entity that offers extensive support schemes and services on both the individual and enterprise levels to scale up Bahrain's development ecosystem. In line with Sustainable Development Goals, Tamkeen has realized key achievements over the past 12 years of operation, some of which are milestones toward meeting SDG numbers 5, 8, 9, and 17. As part of its efforts to promote women's participation in the total development, Tamkeen has specifically designed financing and business incubation programs to support female-owned startups to help them develop and grow, a vital step that contributes to the fulfillment of the 5th SDG of achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. Today, 47% of citizens served by Tamkeen are Bahraini women. As part of its Women's Enablement Scheme, Tamkeen boasts that 83% of women served managed to start up successful ventures. As for the training initiatives, over 50,000 women have been supported through Tamkeen's training programs, representing 53% of the total support. Goal number 8 on promoting sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work closely corresponds to Tamkeen's widest range of initiatives launched at both individual and enterprise levels. Since its establishment in 2006, Tamkeen has injected more than $3 billion towards supporting over 170,000 enterprises and individuals. The Business Development Initiative supported more than 45,000 enterprises, making up 53% of active businesses across the country. The amount injected also supported the training and development of more than 125,000 individuals, representing 38% of Bahraini workforce in the private sector, offered through training and career progression programs. Tamkeen's wage increment initiatives contributed to an average increase of 9% in the salaries of Bahrainis, while other initiatives supported the creation of more than 8,500 employment opportunities in the market. Stressing the significant impact of the ninth goal, build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation, financing was one of the most essential services enabled through Tamkeen to help enterprises grow their businesses. With access to financing of up to $3.1 million, Tamkeen, in collaboration with various partner banks, businesses are now able to access financing with a subsidy of 50% of the annual profit rate. Partnerships for the goals is another objective of the SDGs that has been highlighted through Tamkeen's 12 years of work through over 4,500 public engagements and consultations to collect the feedback of more than 120,000 key partners across the country. The consultations were aimed at understanding the expectations of partners, their views, and suggestions to improve and develop initiatives that better meet the needs of the market. Addressing the different sustainable development issues, Tamkeen's indirect contribution to other SDGs include indicators of good health and well-being, quality education, affordable and clean energy, and reduced inequalities. In the aspect of good health and well-being, Tamkeen managed, to date, the training of more than 2,500 individuals to become qualified healthcare practitioners. It also served around 10% of Bahrainis in initiatives that fall under the healthcare sector. Quality education also had its share of contribution in Tamkeen's support programs. Around 4,000 students are trained every year in partnership with the Junior Achievement Program to expand youth education, thus contributing to economic development. More than 38,500 individuals are trained and certified in more than 40 different fields. To promote efforts toward affordable and clean energy, Tamkeen has been supporting businesses that enable energy efficiency and renewables. Reduced inequalities objectives are fulfilled throughout Tamkeen's initiatives aimed primarily to empower individuals to get fair chances to compete in the workforce through access to quality training, foster inclusive growth by encouraging the economic participation of Bahraini nationals, support niche industries, fisheries, agriculture, through events, incubators, funding, etc. Tamkeen is keen on focusing its ambition in meeting the strategic goals of Bahrain Economic Vision 2030, which clearly outlines its aspirations in shifting the country's economy from depending only on oil wealth to a productive, sustainable, globally competitive economy driven by a pioneering private sector.
Let me start with my left, Dr. Nasser Qaidi. He's Chief Investment and Marketing Officer at Tamkeen. And to his left, Mr. Jonathan Ottmans, Global Entrepreneurship Network, founder and president of the network. And then to his left, Ms. Lana Al-Attar, founder of Good Juju. She'll tell you what Good Juju is in a minute, a digital agency providing development and IT consultancy to good social initiatives and companies. And to my immediate right, Mr. Victor Mulas, Disruptive Technology Initiative Core Team and president at the present office at the World Bank Group. And then to his right, last but not least, Dr. Samiksha Desai, a Director of Knowledge Creation and Research in Entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation. Welcome to all of them. We are very delighted that they are here to enlighten us. The way we have agreed to proceed is for me to ask each speaker 2 questions that is more or less the translation of the question that you have on the screen, but tailored to their perspective and their comparative advantage and experiences. I have asked, and each speaker has kindly accepted to answer these two questions in 5 minutes. If you see me stand up, means I'm celebrating that they have stuck to that agreement. If they see me fidgeting, they will understand they need to conclude. So hopefully they will spare me the latter spectacle. And without further ado, I'm going to give them the floor. But after they speak, hopefully we'll have a good 40 minutes for question and answers. And then I will bring the event to a conclusion by taking 5 minutes or so to share with you what I believe should be the takeaways from what we will have heard. So this is where, how we're going to go about it. And therefore, without further ado, it's my pleasure to start with Dr. Al-Qaidi. But before they give the floor to Dr. Al-Qaidi, who is, as I mentioned, from Tamkeen, he's the Chief Investment of Marketing Office at Tamkeen. For some of you who probably don't know Arabic, do you know what Tamkeen is? Obey. Huh? Obey. Obey. Oh, the exact opposite, my friend. I don't know what kind of Arabic you were taught. You better not saying it in front of women. Now, Tamkeen means the enabler, the empowerer, the ones who unleash the inherent capacity of individuals, and once he has or she has done that, she better get out of the way. So that's what Tamkeen is about. And therefore, our first speaker, Dr. Al-Qaidi, is from Tamkeen, and the two questions that we have for him are the following. In light of what we just watched through the video, can you expand on the role of education in fostering entrepreneurship? And also, how is Tamkeen engaging and leveraging its relationship with the private sector to help achieve the 2030 agenda? You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mahmoud. Thank you, my colleagues, for being on the stage with us today. And thank you all for attending this very important session where we'll give us the opportunity to communicate, give you a little bit of a snapshot on what we're doing as a country and how Tamkeen is contributing to the SDGs. As Mr. Mahmoud clearly mentioned, Tamkeen means empowerment and enablement. And I think when you're talking about learning and development and nurturing an environment that is able to prosper and grow, learning and development becomes a critical aspect of any prospering community across any country in the world. Tamkeen was established for that particular purpose, to ensure that we are able to provide support solutions to the private sector and enable the private sector to take control of the development and the direction of the economic growth of the country. This is based upon the vision of the government to transition Bahrain from an oil-based economy to one which is driven by private sector development. So where the private sector becomes the engine of economic growth, and where through the provision of different support initiatives, Tamkeen is able to allow citizens and those operating businesses in Bahrain to basically explore any opportunities that are able to enhance their standard of living, growth, development, and really take advantage of what the country has to offer. And I think within the scope of what Tamkeen has to offer, we are an organization which has tackled multiple segments in terms of we provide support solutions to youth, to job seekers, to employees, to startups, growth stage businesses, and mature businesses. And our objective here is to look at the entire ecosystem and make sure that the support is there so that people can leverage on any opportunity that they would like to fulfill their ambitions and development objectives. So when we're talking about learning and development, a key element of what Tamkeen does is, again, providing access to solutions that will enable you to, again, get more information about what's happening in the market, what skills are required, what are the development plans and objectives of the country, where market opportunities exist both locally and internationally, and how you as an individual can take advantage of those to enhance your standard of living and contribute positively to the growth of the economy. And this is essentially how we view things, in that by taking the power to the communities and making sure that the private sector leads the growth agenda, and making sure that as a country we are allowing citizens to play a proactive role in and participate proactively in the growth of the national economy. And this is a key paradigm shift in terms of looking at a population or around the world which often looks at government to steer and drive economic growth. And so what we want to invest in is the ability of individuals to grasp opportunities on their own, provide them with the resources that they need to make that leap forward. And Tamkeen does that through multiple ends. We invest in provision of grants. We provide financing, as was mentioned in the video. We provide training support. We have internationalization programs. We are developing export solutions. And this is just basically a snapshot of all the projects that we have to offer. But essentially, we would like to cater all solutions to any individual that is looking to invest positively in their future in the country. So when we're talking about how we operate, Tamkeen works very much in a position of a bridge between the private sector and the government, where we are a quasi-government entity. We are not we work very closely with the private sector. Our board is comprised of different stakeholders from the private sector and government, where we take into consideration all views and issues that need to be considered to make sure that Tamkeen is providing positive, tangible support to the private sector on all levels. Through this, we conduct numerous public consultations, numerous engagements with the private sector to ensure that we are really hearing the views of what's happening in the market and how we can adapt our programs and initiatives to better serve the needs of all citizens. And to meet those development objectives that we have, it's very important to make sure that the private sector is fully involved and engaged in that process. So when we're looking at how we develop our solutions, how we can contribute better, if we do not hear the voices of the people who we're supposed to be serving, then we are not doing our jobs as effectively as we could. And so we take very seriously the point that of a very democratic, proactive approach to developing our projects and solutions, which is making sure that we engage with all necessary stakeholders, whether they are from the private sector, from civil society, from the government, to and NGOs to develop the right solutions and be open to new ideas. With ever-changing dynamics in the private sector, we are often looking to adapt quickly. Bahrain is a small country, and so we have to work extra hard to make sure that we are developing solutions that work better. And so this is something that we are keen to work with multitude of institutions around the world, including the Global Entrepreneurship Network, to bring in the Global Entrepreneurship Congress to Bahrain next year. And where, again, act as a bridge, as a platform to allow different opportunities, different organizations to see the value of doing business in Bahrain. And where, through our entrepreneurship support, we are very keen on positioning Bahrain as a platform for startups, and by providing them with learning opportunities, development opportunities as individuals, and then translating those similar suite of solutions to the businesses once they establish. So we are trying to make a very strong proactive footprint in the region and globally, and I think this is why we are so engaged with many communities around the world to try to promote different solutions and opportunities, because we're a small economy, we have to look globally, and we have to make sure that companies and individuals do think globally when it comes to innovation, how they position themselves, how they position their ideas. They have to be open, pioneering, and innovative in the way they view their plans and opportunities. And We obviously will continue this path going forward, and we look to engage as many partners as possible, again, to look at how we can work together. We are an organization that our bread and butter is partnerships. We are, when we say Tamkeen means enablement to empowerment, that means we can't do anything on our own. We have to work with other parties to get things done. And the best way to do it is by establishing stable, long-term partnerships to invest in new ideas, be able to adapt, be able to innovate, and make sure that our solutions do achieve tangible impact for our community of customers, the national economy, and all our stakeholders that Tamkeen deals with.
Thank you very much for being brief and for sharing with us your perspective. So based on Bahrain experience and on the basis of what Madame Safa shared with us, so you need three things, and I'm summarizing quickly: a national vision, a support mechanism, an enabler, a mechanism that bridges various stakeholders, that foster partnership, but also create ecosystem where learning and empowering is made possible. So citizens are just as leaders as those who are enabling them. So thank you for sharing with us these very valuable thoughts based on Bahrain's experience. It's my pleasure now to give the floor to Mr. Jonathan Ortmans. I usually check to make sure that I give the floor to a man, then a woman, then a man, and a woman. Obviously, I didn't do my homework this time. So without further ado, Mr. Ortmans, the two questions that I have for you, how can this global entrepreneurial ecosystem that you've been developing over the years be leveraged to facilitate the implementation of the SDG? My second question, which really came from reading by chance one of some of the good articles that you've written, we live in a world where in many societies hope and trust seem to be in short supply, leaving many people behind. From your experience, can entrepreneurship help turn this around? Thank you.
Well, thank you for those lovely questions. And first of all, of course, thank you to the International Peace Institute for having us, and indeed to our dear friends at Tamkeen and the World Bank, and of course, especially for me, the Kauffman Foundation, that has been the inspiration of our work over the course of the last 10 years. You've got before you some astounding examples of thought leadership and intelligent thinking about how we wade through the future with this. So I want to congratulate both the Kingdom of Bahrain and indeed IPI for putting this together. I'll start with the second question if I can first. You know, I think we're now entering a period that I've often talked about where we've reinvented what entrepreneurship is about in the global context. It used to be that it had a kind of narrow commercial significance. And one of the things that we've discovered in working in this field and building ecosystems in as best we can in 170 countries is that it's really rather represented the possibility of a human endeavor for the benefit of all. It's become, as we've democratized entrepreneurship, it has indeed become a global Tamkeen. It's become an enabler. It's become a beacon of hope, I think, for many people in parts of the world that have not seen that hope. And better still, beyond the extraordinary new profiles of this generation of entrepreneurs who are less selfish, they're global, they're connected, they like to have fun, but most importantly, they view the world ahead of them as a glass half full, not half empty, which is important when we see globalization being attacked and we see lots of at least things that we used to hold true being challenged right now in great conflicts across the world. And I think entrepreneurs just see a path forward. They look, they see political disruption, they see economic disruption, they see disruption of traditional business models, and they don't get frightened. They don't think, oh my gosh, what's going to happen in the future? They actually look at it, they thrive on that uncertainty and that unpredictability that has been poured all over us over the last few years. In fact, they view it as when you shake up the rules as an opportunity to do something better and faster that will enable more people and do it in a more inclusive way. So on that optimistic note, there's another note which I think is relevant to the people in this room, because I'm not looking out on a room of people who are entrepreneurs. I've had the great privilege of building and selling 2 companies and of being an economist, but also working for government. So I've sort of worked on both sides of the public and private sector environment. But what's really happened is that we've got a new era, a very, very new era, where it's no longer about public-private partnerships, in my view. I think we've even moved beyond that. It's an era where public sector institutions, whether it be governments and indeed NGOs, have become symbiotically connected to entrepreneurs. So what do I mean by that? Why does that matter? Well, 10 years ago, if you were an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, you did everything you could to be polite to the people that lived in Washington, D.C. and in government, but ostensibly you felt that they were irrelevant. They were unimaginative, rather gray characters that wore suits and ties, and they certainly didn't represent the energy and the vigor that you found in your own local startup ecosystem. That's now changed. It's changed when you've got entrepreneurs like Steve Case, who at the beginning of every speech he gives in every town across this country, he will say, if you are an entrepreneur and you're not following public policy, forget it. It's now part of the fabric of the ecosystem. So it's not just public-private sectors, it's a community, it's an ecosystem which makes up thinkers, makes up entrepreneurs, investors, but makes up governments at the local and at the national level. And so I think you're now in an environment where also we've unleashed armies of people that in the name of hope are trying to create a better future for themselves. And there's only so many things that they can do before they start getting involved in disrupting the traditional semi-regulated businesses and industries of our planet. And when they start to do that, they realize that they can't do it unless they're doing it holding hands with the regulators and the public institutions that must manage and control those models in the future. So for a quick analogy, it's the notion that if you're going to be Uber and you're going to go into Paris and you're going to create a new type of entity that people don't know whether it's a taxi cab company or a piece of technology, naturally the sensible way to do this would be that you're sitting down having that discussion, thinking about the public at hand and the broader interests together. I want to echo one other point that actually we discussed at lunch. What we've been doing about this, to come to the second question, is at GEN, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, where we're very privileged to be doing ecosystem building work in 170 countries. We're looking at both data collection and research to be able to make sure that what we do is informed by reality, that you're looking for more robust analysis, because there's been a lot of energy and enthusiasm into creating more and more and more entrepreneurial support programs, but we haven't actually seen the kind of results we should have for the level of energy and investment that's gone into it. We've also done a substantial amount of work in rolling out better and more advanced interventions to help communities and indeed the startups in them to be able to create the opportunities that there may be talent, but we're trying to create the opportunities. But we've also done a third thing, which I think is particularly relevant for this international audience, and that's we've tried to find an onboarding, a make ready, a cultural bridge and transition for governments to be able to enter this world. It's still very difficult. It's a little bit of oil and water still out there. And in that regard, at the Global Entrepreneurship Network, the way we've done this is by building a global grassroots community over the course of the last 10 years. A community that actually feels so empowered and enabled. They feel like actually they're stronger than their own governments. You know, today is a lot happening in Moscow. I think we all read the newspapers. But when we held our Global Entrepreneurship Congress in Moscow, we did it 1 week by serendipity. I see one person who was there after Mr. Putin had invaded the Crimea. And of course, there was a big geopolitical dispute. And interestingly, out of 7,000 people building ecosystems around the world, only 13 didn't show up. And they found that very enabling. They realized that actually maybe they were actually stronger than any one head of state, that maybe they had a power and a force for good that was built on something that had sustainable value. And that currency is this, that currency is trust. Didn't matter what country they came from, role they played in the ecosystem, what culture, what language, at the end of the day, they had built trust across national boundaries. And I think that's the great power before you. It's not just the work that we're going to do more directly, it's supporting the SDGs and in working more closely in intermingling our cultures and our work, but it's also the fact that we think that entrepreneurs will bring a grassroots, enormous volume of trust. There are some programs that operate in all countries in the world to help entrepreneurs that literally reach thousands of entrepreneurs a year. Those entrepreneurs are constantly in touch with each other. They're building communities that can build trust. And I think that's a very important currency for those of you who are looking in the environment of peace. So I echo that, and in that spirit, I'll finish by also emphasizing that in addition to the work we do at the ministerial level, we will be having a ministerial in Bahrain, where we'll be inviting governments from across the world to come together in that spirit to share knowledge as to how they leverage that trust in a policy environment. And we're very, very, very proud to be partnering with the Kingdom of Bahrain and the Tamkeen and various other partners in having that held in Manama next April. And we hope all of you will come. You're all welcome, and we can provide information. And if you want further information, we have it at the back on the right. We've got books and so forth. But thank you so much indeed. This has been an honor to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Ortmans. We clap at the end. We will clap at the end. I promise you I'll give you the opportunity to clap. I don't know if it is by accident or by design. Have you heard of a phrase, yes, I can? Yeah. And Tamkeen and can have something in common. And I was struck by how you said that entrepreneurship is about hope creation and trust creation. And the ecosystem tries to create the environment for these, to foster these important qualities. And I really like how you have underlined the importance of building communities across borders, and how you are looking to use the SDG to upscale this new definition that you want to give to entrepreneurship, different meaning. It's my now pleasure to turn to our third speaker to my extreme right, Dr. Samiksha Desai. And the two questions that I have for you, Dr. Desai, is how is your foundation addressing the barriers that stand in the way of the dream that we've been talking about, these dreamers with big ideas? And in your opinion, how can your foundation and partner organization can make entrepreneurship work for the SDGs? Dr. Desai, you have the floor.
So I'll actually start with a question, if I may. How many people in the room know exactly what the barriers in their ecosystems are and how to fix them? I see 2 hands. What the barriers in your ecosystem are and how to fix them. So let me back up and tell you a little bit about what we do at the Kauffman Foundation. Our founder developed a focus on education in entrepreneurship because of his own life experiences, and that's the mission that we serve. When we talk about entrepreneurship in the context of ecosystems, we use the language of barriers because we're really focused on what prevents a person who has a good idea, who has a goal, and who has the ability to turn that idea into a successful business, what keeps that person from doing so? And in some cases, the barriers may be related to geography, they may be related to immigration status, they may be related to educational status, race, infrastructure. And so we really look at it from the question of what has caused the decline in entrepreneurship in the United States, and what can we do to reverse that decline? We have the advantage of being very close to entrepreneurs and the organizations that support them. Through our grant making, we issue grants to entrepreneurship support organizations, wide variety of types, and we really want to focus on magnifying impact. One of the things that we do is research, and we issued this year, for example, the Knowledge Challenge. It's the first year that we're doing this, and the basic idea is that we look for really impactful, actionable research where we can go to entrepreneurs, we can take our findings, we can go to entrepreneurship support organizations, and we can say, this is what we've learned that can help you. I'll address the second question in that context. The foundation and other organizations really have a responsibility to listen. We have to listen to entrepreneurs, and that's the first step in actually serving them. One of the things that we can do with listening is we can then take that and we can look at ecosystems around the world, around the country, and we can start to identify the common themes and then the particular questions that relate to barriers in each individual ecosystem. From a research perspective, what we really want to do is learn. So we want to be able to say, these are the problems, this is how we weight them, right? This is how we know that this problem is particularly difficult for this type of entrepreneur in this kind of ecosystem. So we want to get fine-grained. We want to get to low levels of disaggregation so that we can understand what to do and where and for whom. And then the other thing that we have to do is we have to take our information, we have to take the knowledge that we create, and we have to share, right? We have to share and we have to learn from each other. Partnerships are an extremely important part of learning. We're in an age also where data and information technology make it really easy for us to share information. And so we want to take our learnings and we want to take them all the way back, for example, to grant making or to the organizations that we first support. And we want to say, this is what we learned. And then we want to continue that dialogue. So I view it as a feedback loop where we're constantly moving from one problem, generating knowledge, using that knowledge to address the problem, and then continuing with the next problem. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Two important elements that I noted from your brief intervention, and thank you for being brief. One is you dedicate your efforts to understand what prevents a person who has an idea to make it happen. And you do that with the understanding not only to address whatever barriers in the way, but also make sure that impact and magnifying is important. The second point, which is usually unusual, at least from the field where I come from, that you listen with the intent to understand, with the intent to learn, not necessarily quickly solve or help. And then on the basis of that, provide the support and the mechanism for that person to be empowered. That's very, very helpful. For our audience here, you throw a big word that's still a big word with me. Can you take maybe less than a minute to, what is an ecosystem? What kind of animal is this?
It's, yeah. So it's an acknowledgement that there's no linear process to entrepreneurship, and that the environment that an entrepreneur is working in is really a complex system. And it has many moving parts, and so it's very rare, and we've seen this from history, that you can say, this is the one factor, right, that matters completely and only in the system for the entrepreneur. And so the ecosystems approach really looks at the complex relationships between the different types of influences that can shape an entrepreneur's decision, an entrepreneur's resource allocation, resource access, and ultimately the outcome of a venture.
Thank you very much. Did you hear that? I'm going to test you what you understood in a minute.
Now, there are many ways to define an ecosystem.
I'm just
but it really is about the complexity of the system that the entrepreneur is embedded in.
Thank you. That's very helpful. It helped me understand what my daughter first explained to me, and now I'm a better student. My pleasure now is to give the floor to Mr. Victor Molas from the World Bank on my right hand. And the two questions that we have for you, Mr. Molas, is I certainly understand through this crash course that my colleague Jimena put me through, God bless her, that technology democratizes innovation. But I don't understand what disruptive technology is. And why do you think it is often credited with fostering a new generation of entrepreneurs? My second question is, how is the World Bank supporting young entrepreneurs in countries with emerging startup ecosystems, I can say it, such as the Kingdom of Bahrain?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the International Peace Institute, the government of Bahrain, Tamkeen, Jen, Kauffman Foundation for inviting us also to this event and being part of it. So thank you for the questions, and I think it's very important to put a little bit of context of where we are right now. And we are all seeing that technologies are going very fast lately, right? So we hear all the time as a new technology just has happened. Now we're talking about quantum computing. Before it was blockchains and bitcoins, and before that artificial intelligence, and then the robots are going to take over all of us, right? So we are all the time hearing all these things. So we are realizing that technologies are being developed very fast, and they are actually starting to change the way we live, the way we work, the way we organize. And I started to have structural changes in those dynamics. So that is what we understand as disruptive technologies. It's not just one technology, it's a combination of technologies that start building one upon each other and start affecting the way we've been living, basically, as humans, the way the institutions are, including the market. So we are seeing a lot of transformations starting to happen. And you can see very specific examples. Uber is one of them. If you're a taxi driver, definitely Uber disrupted your way of life. But if you're a user, Google Maps have changed completely your way of life, because now it's very easy for you to find places to go there. Now, Uber wouldn't have had such success without Google Maps. So you start thinking how these things start going one upon each other. Now think when automatic cars start bringing and connecting also with Uber. What are the changes you're going to see in your city? Maybe we stop having buses, and then we have some different kind of things. So we don't know how the changes are going to happen. What we see is that they are happening, and they are building one upon each other, creating a new scenario that is disruptive in the sense that it's changing the structure of what was there before, right? So from the World Bank perspective, we have a very clear mission. Basically, we have two goals. We call them the twin goals, which is the eradication of extreme poverty and the increasement of shared prosperity, basically having development with equality, right? So it's not enough just to eradicate poverty. We also have to have equality to have a sustainable development. And they are very aligned with the SDGs. So for us in our mission, what we're thinking is how these new technologies are changing the typical way of thinking of development, the typical way of achieving these goals. We know that it's very difficult to achieve the SDGs and our goals right now in the dates that we have. I mean, we've done a lot of tremendous efforts and work, big success so far, but still far away from achieving it on the date. We think technologies can help because we are seeing how they can leapfrog towards those goals. We have seen, for instance, in Kenya, we have seen M-Pesa, which is a solution that provided financial access through mobile payments to population that before we thought it was impossible to reach on a scale, because taking banks in the traditional way to the rural areas was not economically feasible, and it wasn't happening. The institutions weren't there. And suddenly a mobile company did that in 5 years, right? So that's incredible potential. That's a leapfrogging opportunity there. Can we do the same with energy to get off-grid solutions to urban rural areas? Can we do that with education too? And the answer is we can. It is a possibility. We are seeing it right now that they are, with mobile networks as a platform that are evolving, with the internet, we are seeing the erosion of barriers to access some of these resources, right? The question is, how can we leverage this potential? Now, the only problem is that with the bright side comes the dark side too, right? So technologies also have a dark side, right? And we have seen that with cybersecurity, for instance. It brings some new risks that are there. But there is a potential also for larger exclusion. And we are seeing global platforms emerging. With some of them, we have some concerns with privacy and use of data, right? So how can we avoid the dark side being in the process of development and use the potential for leapfrogging? And that's something that we've been thinking at the bank. And bear with me, I'm going to end up in entrepreneurship, I assure you. But this is a little bit of the background that is behind our thought right now. So we try to understand a little bit what were the main technology trends. It's not one technology, but the trends that all these combination of technologies are happening that are affecting our mission and development in particular. And we come up with around 5 big technology trends. There can be more or less. This is just an exercise to see what are the main ones that we are seeing affecting. And the first one is the emergence of platforms and how they are becoming new means of production, right? Because they are allowing to eliminate barriers at a global level. They are allowing entrepreneurs coming from developing countries to access those platforms to actually avoid all the barriers they may have in their own country, because suddenly they can access the Google platform or the Facebook platform and do a business online and get resources out of that. That 20 years ago, it was impossible, right? So that is a great way of doing that. But at the same time, that's introducing disruption to traditional business, right? So it's a new ways of production, and it's a new ways of sharing. And then you have all these Ubers and so on. They are also platforms. So this way of creating new business is happening. The other one we are seeing is digitalization in itself. Everything that becomes digital allows for a potential of access in a almost global scale. And that is very important for populations like the rural population that usually are left behind, right? So it happens with finance payments, as I said, and financial access, as I said, with M-Pesa. But think that more and more things start to digitalize, right? So with 3D printing, we are seeing that even production of goods is being digitalized, right? So you are starting to see that as things become digitalized, the easier it is to just access them with a device like this, wherever you are, right? So that is opening a huge new area for accessing basic services and other kind of products. The third one that we are seeing is this interaction between human and machines and how they are changing the nature of work. And it is very likely that we will not have the same kind of job we have now in 20 years from now. It's very likely it doesn't exist. It's very likely we don't work for a large corporation. And the nature of what is work and what is not, if it would be more freelancing or it would be more entrepreneurship, that is changing right now. My bet is it will go more into something similar to what entrepreneurship is. you will need to look for your job every 2-3 years, and you will need to continue changing and sending you as a product, right? So that has a lot of relationships then with entrepreneurship. You start to see that there are some connections there of what is there. The fourth one is the question of learning. Yes, changing of work is going to happen, but learning is also changing. You need to start learning how to learn. You need to learn continuously. It doesn't stop. Yeah? We used to go to university, get a degree, done. You get into a job. Not anymore. You have to reinvent yourself and continue learning every time, right? And the fifth one, it's about social contract. We are seeing platforms that are distributed platforms. Primarily, we are seeing that with blockchains. But what does that mean? What does a distributed platform mean? Well, basically means that this platform allows trust to happen in an undistributed way. So there is not an authority that has to give the trust. So we are used to have the government to give that, right? When you don't need the government anymore for trust, what does it say about governments? What does it say about institutions? What does it say about the countries we have right now and that system? So we are going to see a lot of changes there, and we need to start thinking and preparing for that, right? As I said, with every one of them, there is an empowerment, there's an opportunity. There is also a potential threat, right? So how do we work maximizing one and minimizing the other one? So that brings me into what are the bank strategy that we are trying to think about how to deal with this moving forward. And we are the bank, and being the bank, we decided to have 3 pillars because we call them pillars. And we use a letter. We always use a letter. So in this case, it's the B. So we have the pillar build, the pillar boost, and the pillar broker. The 3 Bs, we call it. I mean, it's very bankish. I apologize for that. But we are in the UN, so you understand us. So the first one, we call it build. It's about building what should be the building blocks of the new tech-led economy. And those are thinking about what kind of infrastructure we should continue working on, but how do we see a traditional infrastructure in the lenses of new technologies? Which one may become obsolete? So don't invest on it, or do it in a flexible way. So in one sense, do not build poles for telephone poles when mobile telephone was coming, right? So you needed to change that. But the most important thing is what are the new infrastructure that we need? We know we need broadband. We need digital ID. We're going to need digital financial inclusion. So those are building blocks looking into the new tech economy. It's the new infrastructure, let's put it that way. The second is Boost, and Boost is more about the soft infrastructure. And that is what I think we should focus now, which is the human capital. How should we support the new skills, the new kind of education, and then how do we create these entrepreneurship ecosystems all around the world and support them growing? Why? Because the knowledge now is being distributed. It's no longer one institution like NASA that has all the knowledge, or Bell Laboratories. Now it's a combination of research institutions, entrepreneurs, and academics, and all together, and then they form startups. So we are seeing these knowledge hubs happening at ecosystem level, but also the skill development happening there. When you do a startup, you're learning. And when you interact with the startups, you're learning too, and building the firm's capabilities. So they go on that sense. And then the broker pillar, it's more about how do we harness global partnerships towards this development, especially with new kind of assets, particularly data. We're very concerned about the lack of data, of relevant data at a global level being used by governments for public goods. So now we have new actors like a Google or Facebook or Amazon that have better data and more instrumental data than the one that governments have or we have. So how do we bring a coalition of the good to share those resources in a trusted environment to work for development? So I just give in a nutshell the background. I won't extend more because I think I'm going beyond everything else. But if you have any questions for entrepreneurship beyond that, we can deal them later.
Indeed. Thank you very much. When I read your bio, I said I might need a translator next to me to help me understand, but you've done such a good job. Let me see if I captured the 2 main points correctly. And thank you for sharing with us what disruption means. I think there is digitalization. What I've kept is that digitalization has facilitated access to global scale and empowered population that otherwise would have been excluded or marginalized. And thank you for giving us the two examples of Uber and the M-Pesa in Kenya. It's a fascinating, by chance, I'm glad you mentioned M-Pesa. I don't take Uber, but I'm glad you mentioned M-Pesa. But disruptive technology, as you rightly pointed out, has advantages and disadvantages, pitfalls that we need to be, some are less bright, some dark, some less, and the issue of the changes in the nature of job. But one area that from my background struck me is the disruption of the social contract. As we understand it, and was certainly, as I have studied it, the state is a primary penholder of the social contract, and therefore the provider of knowledge and information and control, not empowerment. And this disruptive technology has created greater and greater opportunities for empowerment. And thank you for sharing with us the 3 Bs. Now, last but not least, I would like now to give the floor to Ms. Lana Al-Attar. Dear Lana, how do you assess women's efforts in seizing opportunities, such as the one we just heard and by other speakers, and enable women to participate in innovation and entrepreneurship? Do you think, my second question, do you think women entrepreneurs, and you are certainly one, you will share with us, are more likely to get funding if they emphasize their social mission, if they emphasize the global good that they would deliver? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Ladies, gentlemen, distinguished guests, thank you so much for having me. My name is Lana Al-Attar, and I'm a serial social tech entrepreneur from Bahrain. I'm a product of the ecosystem set up in Bahrain. I'm the founder of Good Juju. Good Juju is a digital agency with a conscience. We try to empower people with technology. We empower socially good businesses and initiatives with technology. If the business isn't, we help them to get some kind of social good in them. I'm also the founder of Tasafah, and it came out of a need with my work through Good Juju. Tasafah is an e-commerce platform that sells products and services online. We noticed that sometimes, no matter how low our rates are with Good Juju, they still need to be subsidized. So what we did is we built them a platform that they can have their products and services online. I'm also an Ashoka changemaker and a global shaper. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous.
It's okay.
I needed to get that out there.
I'll give you time to breathe, I promise.
Thank you. I just had to follow all of you guys, you know? And I'm like, I'm an entrepreneur. All right, so let me start over. Good Juju, it means good magic. And we empower people with technology. What we do is we look after the little guys. There's no one looking after charities and schools and people that are doing the fluffy good stuff. So we say, hey guys, we're here, we're really good at what we do. Let's take care of you with technology, and we really boost them. So some examples are we have an autism foundation, excuse me, and they wanted a fundraising platform. So what we did is we built that platform for them, and they were able to raise funds to fund their projects in autism. We have environmental disaster risk reduction. We have refugees, Cameroonian refugees in Morocco that have their own Shutterstock. And these are the things that I am empowered to do. So as a result of that, we noticed that sometimes we do keep our prices very competitive, and we have a lot of support here and there to help us to do that. But sometimes low is still not low enough. So we built a platform, and it's like, okay, so I have to sell something online. We're like, hey guys, okay, so do you do any good? Fine, let's get you on there. If you don't do any good, we'll help you. Let's say you're a bank, for example, and and you don't have any CSR, no projects, nothing whatsoever, we'll say, okay, tell us a little bit about your values. Do you like the environment? So we'll go to the environmental society locally, and most of the times they won't have any websites on there. And we'll co-brand it for them and then give them that goodness to them. We're cash flow positive, we're growing, we're scaling, and in the midst of it all, we opened our second venture, and it's thanks to the ecosystem. I'm also an Ashoka change maker, so I believe in changing the world for good. I come up here on stage besides being nervous because I believe in getting my message out there. I'm a global shaper as well, which is under the World Economic Forum. And also, this is one of the most interesting things that I do, is that I'm the founder and lead of Google Developer Group in Manama. So we teach people to use technologies, the newest things, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, you name it. And that's a little bit about me. So as for your questions, Dr. Youssef, how do you assess women's effort in seizing opportunities and actively participating in innovation and entrepreneurship? As you can see, we seize them, definitely, in the region. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the women back home as well. We have one of our poster persons for FinTech is a woman. And her name is Fatma Ibrahim. She's also under 30 and on the board of our Economic Development Board. We have another young lady called Wafa Beidat, and she ran the region's biggest woman power summit, first ever in the region. We had 50 speakers, including international speakers, and 500 women regionally. And that tells you a sense of what the women are grasping. We are very empowered and constantly working together with the ecosystem to really grasp those opportunities. And you know what I noticed? That each generation, you know, when we notice the little ones coming through, we're like, hey guys, this is how you do it, you know? So it's the trend is there, lots of rising in tech, lots of rising in fintech. We even have women in gaming as well. Do I think women entrepreneurs are more likely to get funding if they emphasize their social mission? It depends on the funders, because obviously we have people that fund for social impact and normal funders. However, I do notice that people are more interconnected. So I will share my resources and my frameworks on how to be more profitable, because we make a lot of profit. While still being socially good. So the idea is to be profit, planet, people, and not just planet people, because you need to be sustainable as well. I do notice that people are more likely to invest in businesses that are socially good. My employees, they get paid to be heroes every day in and day out. We pay them to help this Autism Foundation or help the refugees or to help so on and so forth. So yes, I do believe that there is opportunities for funding if it's positioned properly. Thank you.
Thank you so much. When I heard you say I am a serial social entrepreneur, I got nervous. And then I calmed down when you are a digital agency with a conscience. Then I calmed down. More importantly, I thought you were a charitable foundation, and then you said, actually, we make profit by empowering the little guy through technology and changing the world for good is a good business proposition. And that women, and particularly young women entrepreneurs, are leading the way is really, really comforting. And for this particular audience, and where we work here with the UN, where the glass tends to be, unfortunately, half full, it's nice to hear some positive messages. So the floor is open. We have about 15 minutes or so. I will acknowledge you. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then if you could please bring to this gentleman first with the red shirt the microphone. Please tell us a little bit who you are, and so we can capture it on the video.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name's Jose Garcia. I'm with a company called Angel Hack. We're the largest pre-seed stage accelerator in the world. So, Mr. Sai, I understand the ecosystem is a hard thing to explain. Just to add a comment to that, the way we interpret ecosystem is we look at it as a supply chain between different accelerators, corporations, government agencies, everyone that's trying to build economic development, creating job creation. So it's a supply chain. Accelerators produce startups, the startups produce jobs, and everyone else supplies the funding and resources necessary for these startups to succeed.
And your question?
So my question is, one of the challenges that we face, because innovation is one of the things that we specialize in, is when it's scientific related, right? Like you're doing something that's brand new, never been done before. VCs, government agencies, like, what's your precedent for success? How does this match? How do we make money? And when it's scientifically based, that takes time and energy, and oftentimes you don't have an answer. So what do we do for those kinds of startups? Because those are often the startups that make the biggest impact in the world. And more importantly, they're the ones that end up becoming those huge companies that create thousands of jobs.
Thank you. And then Dr. Daniele there.
Do you hear me? I'm Dr. Daniele. I'll ask my question from two hats. One is the World Federation for Mental Health, and the other is the International Organization for Victim Assistance. In your ecosystem, do you include mental health? Do you include the knowledge that very, very often the barriers are internal, not just external? That is, the hope has to come out of healing, not just assumed in external opportunities. I also would like to ask, from the point of view of victims of post-conflict periods, empowerment is healing to victims, no question about it. And everything you say is totally relevant. Would you address the difficulties or the barriers inherent in those situations and how you would address those in the way you think? Because it seemed to me that your concept of ecosystem assumes normal society under normal conditions, without war, without terrible things happening. And the world is not quite that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There was a hand there. Yes, ma'am.
I think I'm the next one.
Are you the next one because you have the microphone? How about that? Go ahead.
Well,
Please, go ahead.
I just want to mention that I represent, among others, two women's organizations. One is the Bangladesh Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The other is Central and North Punjab, Pakistan Women Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And these support and encourage and grow women's entrepreneurship. And I think more of chambers of commerce and industry for women can be a very forceful element. These, the presidents of both of these organizations have been extraordinarily successful. So if you want any more information, I am very glad to share it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I want to say, okay, thanks to all the presenters. I have just, okay. My name is Dr. Dairo. I work for UNFPA. For those who might not know UNFPA, UNFPA works on women's health, youth development, and family planning across the globe. For me specifically, I worked on issues of youth development in Africa for a couple of years, and we did quite a lot. Most of the problems that we have in the region has to do with the issue of hope, poverty, and the unemployment of the young people. And that's why we see the issue of forced migration and everything, that people are moving everywhere. My specific question, I know that there are a lot of effort going on in Africa, but in terms of what Tamkeen did in Bahrain, where the government is the facilitator of that kind of empowerment of the human capital to be able to create job and employment, and businesses, I would appreciate if Kauffman Global Entrepreneurship Network can highlight a bit of what they're doing in Africa, number one, and then what Tamkeen can also share with how you did it in Bahrain and how the governments in Africa can also facilitate that kind of development. Thanks.
The microphone here in the front. To this lady. Yeah.
I'm Gloria Starkins, and I'm a UN correspondent. Actually, I'm the dean of all the UN correspondents. I just felt very important, sirs, because I've had the pleasure to be in Bahrain, the openness religiously of Bahrain. You have a Jewish community there, a Christian group, you have Buddhists, you have churches, and I think this is very important today that people realize the openness and no racism and no black marks about anybody who wants to work in Bahrain. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So speaking of ecosystem, that's an important element. The lady next to you.
Hello, my name is Kimberly King. I work on special projects with multiple divisions of the UN. Mostly in sustainable development, but also in the innovation ecosystems around the world, including the Middle East. And I have a couple of questions. One of the organizations I founded in a public-private partnership with Sweden is called WISE, Women in Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Sustainable Development. And we work not only with women, but intergenerational. So I'm interested if you connect the dots between the constituencies, innovation being the mechanism, but women, youth, and seniors actually are the fastest growing businesses in the US and many parts of the world. So I'm interested how that plays into your design. The second is I work with innovation ecosystems around the world, and I believe in collaborative innovation. So, and I think that's a next frontier. So while you are doing your own innovation in your ecosystem, I like to connect the ecosystems as well as the constituencies. Is that in your vision? And if not, how can we get it there?
Thank you very much. I think with those questions, I now will turn it back to our panelists. I think there were certain specific questions that were addressed to Tamkeen, others, particularly those relating to mental health and the healing, particularly post-conflict context. Maybe I would like to suggest that Ms. Al-Attar and you, Dr. Desai, could perhaps address those. And any one of you would like to address how to connect the Chamber of Commerce for Women as a potential, but also the collaboration across ecosystem. These are all very important questions. Why don't I start from my extreme left and give you the floor, Ms. Al-Attar.
Thank you, Dr. Yusuf. Regarding mental health, I'm not sure I'm exactly the right person to be answering this, but I'm going to try to do this from my perspective. We have training and coaching, which really helps us to get us into that kind of mindset. When you're getting into entrepreneurship, they say, you know, you jump off the cliff and you build a plane on the way down, and that's pretty stressful. So we get a lot of support, people that hold our hands and tell us, you know, this is normal. We learn to enjoy the hustle and to get through our day-to-days. I have had the honor of being life coached as well, which is also available. It teaches you your values and what's important, and should entrepreneurship really be a priority for you, kind of thing. So yes, we do have those kind of things available from my perspective. I hope that's answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Desai, maybe?
So I completely agree with you that ecosystems aren't perfect in many places, in most places, right? So if they were, we wouldn't be seeing, for example, we focus a lot on the United States. We wouldn't be seeing a decline in entrepreneurship in the United States. So the extent to which an ecosystem is conducive varies significantly. On the mental health question, I think that you hit something that's really important from a research perspective, which is, and again, it's the reason for our interest in ecosystems, is it's one of many individual level processes that you can't study when you say a country has 700,000 startups a year, right? It doesn't actually capture what's happening at the level of the entrepreneur or the individual. And that's where really trying to understand how the individual responds to the environment. So, you mentioned post-conflict environments. How do they shape an individual's perception of risk and an individual's actual risk? And how does it influence access to crucial resources? How do the mental processing and the emotional, the psychological, the social, the cultural and processing of different elements in a specific ecosystem actually come together? So that's absolutely an important question. One of the things, I mentioned the knowledge challenge that we announced earlier this year. One of the things that we really were very interested in was assessing barriers at the level of the individual. So talking to the entrepreneur and understanding what it is. And I think that your question about mental health certainly is part of this broader question about the individual. Yeah. I'd love to, yeah.
Thank you very much. Would you like to address any of these two questions? Sure. Thank you.
I'd also like to just pick up on the mental health just for a second. In the interest of time, I want to throw out a name of someone who, if you want to understand what I think Dr. Desai referred to as the complexity around what we mean about an ecosystem, there's a man called Brad Feld. He wrote a book called Startup Communities. He's about to come out with another book, but it really gets to the heart of the foundation of what this is about. And it is a very human thing. It's a very, very powerful, complex concept. There's no linear nature to it. It's living and it's breathing like a biological ecosystem, which is why the field borrowed the word for its field. But one of the things Brad has really written a lot about is mental health and how that plays into what is happening on entrepreneurially. So just mention that name, Brad Feld. Very, very quickly on the ecosystem front, I think it's really important. I want to draw attention to two of my colleagues here. Cristina Fernandez, who's working on connecting the ecosystems across the world, and Christina's over here if you're interested. But in particular, I also want to point out to those of you that live in New York City, someone I have an enormous amount of respect for, who understands this much better than I do, is Yuval Yarden over here. And Yuval, if you could just stand up, because Yuval's here in New York if you really want to dig into this afterwards. But the reason I mention that is because, as Dr. Desai meant, on the front line. So Yuval's learned about what it means, in inner city Philadelphia, in environments where there was a lack of resources, there was a lack of hope, but maybe a lot of talent, and really understands the ins and outs of this. So if you're and is living here in the city trying to figure it out too. So if you're interested in getting a breathing sense of that, then, so those of you that's new, do talk to Yuval. But you should understand, unfortunately none of you could be at the Kauffman Foundation last week, but they held the most extraordinary event. It's called the eShip Summit, but it was about ecosystem building. And it's just so exciting because this field doesn't have anything to do with money, marketing, accounting. Any of those words did not appear the entire week. But the people in these towns across America are trying to work out how do they build an ecosystem that delivers on the aspirations of people who have very little. The words you saw were, of course, how do we be more inclusive? Collaboration, to echo the point that was made earlier. Listening, learning, sharing. So this is what we mean by an entrepreneurial ecosystem. Now, to those people who came from liberal arts degrees and maybe went in to say, I'm going to go change the world, it's not what you expected out of entrepreneurship, was it? You might think that it's about, profit and just profit. But I think it's been echoed here. I don't know very many entrepreneurs these days that are willing to sacrifice doing good if that's what it takes in order to do well. So I think for those people who come from, having their heart and their passion, how am I going to make the world a better place? How am I going to leave the planet better at the end of the day. I really think you have a whole new generation of people that are building these ecosystems and the firms within them. I call them of course, the Kauffman Foundation has got this lovely expression, the doers and the dreamers. But I like to think of them as people birthing the new and figuring out better ways of helping their fellow citizens. I would also just point out two quick things that were brought up. One was post-conflict. There's a whole new field. There's expeditionary economics, which is challenging a lot of the assumptions that USAID went into, particularly following some of the natural disasters, but also in the post-conflict environment. A lot of support from institutions now in understanding the contribution that entrepreneurs can make in terms of new value creation without, as was, I think, well articulated by Victor, this notion that the paternal force here is government. Now, that's not meant in a challenging or a revolutionary way. It's meant in a way of understanding this new dynamic. And but if there was one thing I could say that I would leave you with is that how many of you really think you understand what blockchain technology is? Hold up your hand. I know you would. There's a guy. But the most exciting thing about blockchain is that you'll understand what we call in our organization distributed networks of trust. But it's the distributed notion here that is so complicated that ecosystems are developing, but also that we're seeing from a global impact perspective. There's distributed data, there's distributed communities, and the thing is no one's in charge. I mean, we've got a blockchain experiment going on, and it took the team so long to explain to me with my gray hair. I was like, well, who's got the equity? There is no equity. Who's controlling it? Like, who's brand? And it was just, this notion of a truly distributed networks. And I think this is a very powerful thing for people to understand. And then just very lastly, in Africa, if you'd like to see me afterwards, we have actually materials at the back, but we opened our first campus in Africa in Johannesburg called 22 on Sloan, which is a 100,000 square foot campus for all of Africa. And we have a whole range of new initiatives that we're rolling out in conjunction with the African Development Bank and a few other institutions. But the general concept is, once again, that you take the notion that Africa works for Africa, and I haven't come across anybody that's looking at this from a national perspective anymore. All the entrepreneurial ecosystems are working together to say, we've got so much in common here. How are we in the stronger African countries going to help others in those that are developing their ecosystems? So I think there's an awful lot of great things happening on that continent that can be lessons for the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. Dr. Al-Qaid, I'm going to give you the floor last, so you'll have the last word, but I just want to give my good friend to my right any comments you have, Victor?
I don't want to extend too much, but just to say, I mean, as the World Bank, we operate in many of the countries you were mentioning. We don't operate we don't have the luxury to operate in the US. That would be fantastic, where you have very good ecosystems, even though you have challenging ones like Detroit. So our experience in many of them is you don't have the basics of the ecosystems, right? So you have to start from a basic perspective. But the main result is when you invest on skills in the human level. And it's that part of the skills that the governments not always do right. So how can you bring new ways of providing those skills that are more experiential, to have more experiential learning about them? And that operates in every environment. And it's interesting because of the fragile and conflict states. You have probably the most entrepreneurship mindset in those states because they've been entrepreneurs to survive. Okay. The question is, how do you overcome the lack of infrastructure into doing that and make it for good? We've seen a lot of things in refugees in Lebanon and Turkey, how things are being used. The last point is about connecting the different ecosystems. Absolutely, yes. That's what you need, because those are knowledge hubs and how you do it. The question is, how do you do that? And that's not easy, right? So we are trying to use intermediaries that we can start creating global networks of connectors, because it's not only one person, it's more than that. Accelerators play a role, but it's not the only one. So how do you do that? It's kind of a question that we are still trying to answer, and we are working on that. But it goes in that direction. The other problem is, what do you have to offer, right? Because if you don't have anything to offer, why the others will connect with you? So there are different dynamics there. I don't want to extend, but just to put you, I mean, we can talk about it a lot.
Thank you very much. Dr. Al-Qaidi, please.
Thank you. I think the underlying theme with all the questions that were raised tonight had to do with how do you get access to the right type of support, and how do you establish or get access to the right type of institutions that can support you. And I think institution building is a critical aspect of it, but this is something where I can give you a little bit of insight about how Tamkeen has worked towards a lot of these objectives, which we spoke about. I mean, the issue is when talking about where you come from, what you need, what sort of support you have, and understanding the ecosystem of what the limitations there are, and who's going to turn you away and who's going to accept your idea and so on. I think this is something that we've understood very well. And the whole issue is, as I mentioned, when you're talking about a situation where as a government, you're trying to transition the private sector to take the lead. It's not a matter of just saying, okay, now we're going to back off and you're going to drive economic progress going forward. You have to provide them with a certain tools and instruments that can allow them to take advantage of those opportunities which you are giving them. So when we're looking at the areas that Tamkeen has gone into, and some of it was addressed in the video that we briefly showed, which really just is scratching the surface of the areas we've been involved in. One of the critical areas is access to financing. And when it comes to access to financing, we've worked with partner banks in Bahrain to subsidize the cost of the interest by 50% and subsidize the guarantee by 50% as well. And this is for loans accepting up to $7 million, over $7 million. So in addition to that, we have grants that provide you with different sorts of grants that cover the cost of technology acquisition, marketing, development, and other sorts of areas, again, covering 50% of those costs. We have introduced investment support as well, which can look at how we can come in as partners and equity partners into your projects and activities. We have our training and development support scheme, which covers 100% of the cost of training, literally cutting the cost of human capital development for companies. We cover 100% of the cost of professional certification. So if you're an individual or a citizen that's looking to develop your skills, capabilities in a particular area, Tamkeen covers the cost by 100%. So we're trying to look at a multitude of schemes, and I haven't gone into the apprenticeship schemes, the startup schemes, the internationalization schemes. We have to the specific startup schemes that we have. There are a multitude of things where we're offering the same types of value proposition, and this is where we're trying to promote and showcase the amount of opportunities available, and that these are all very doable support solutions in a sustainable way that is allowing the private sector to really take advantage of the opportunities that are available. And all we're asking is, we're not asking for a profit in return. Tamkeen is not a investment agency, so to speak, in terms of a venture capital bank or whatever. What we are is we have a development objective. We have to make sure that our projects and solutions translate to the growth and development of the national economy and for the betterment of the lives and well-being of the citizens. And so what we make sure is that if you have the idea, you have the vision, you have the energy and drive, we have the solution for you. And this is where the partnership aspect is so important for us, because we're not, when we first formed Tamkeen, we had literally 3 or 4 solutions. Now we have dozens of different solutions customized to the different nature of support that you might request. And so we're constantly trying to develop and expand upon these to make sure that when you walk here, when you walk in the door, there is something available to you. And we don't discriminate. We have, when it comes to the training support is geared towards nationals, but our business support, which is for entrepreneurs, for investment and others, is for anybody who is opening up a business in Bahrain, because anybody can be a participant in the growth of the national economy. Any business and any entrepreneur that sets up a venture in the country adds to job creation opportunities, adds to other opportunities that help to make Bahrain a better place. So we are trying to make sure that we are constantly open to new ideas, innovation, investment, looking at how we can support it, and we put our money where our mouth is, and we do partner with you on all our activities to make sure that you achieve your objectives. Because if we give you the funding and you fail, we didn't do a very good job of that. So we have to make sure that the funding we provide to you does allow you to achieve your objectives.
Thank you very much. I think after listening to our last speaker, I'm going to change passports and maybe move to see if I can go to Tamkeen. By way of concluding, and since the objective is how we can leverage entrepreneurship and innovation to support or facilitate or accelerate the implementation of the SDG, here are some of the takeaways that maybe you could use them as a recipe for ensuring that this happens. The first one, ideally, a national vision. It's amazing in my own country, Tunisia, what happened to entrepreneurship when the parliament adopted an act called Tunisia Startup Act. It makes a difference when there is a national vision, or at least. Second, is to have a Tamkeen, to have a mechanism, a connector, a facilitator to contribute to the implementation of that vision. A second is what we've been talking about as an ecosystem or an improved regulatory environment and policy initiatives that promote entrepreneurship, including, as we've just heard, the availability and expansion of sources of financing. Another aspect that we have heard is the use of technology, the part, particularly the disruptive technology, but the good element or the good part of technology, as we have heard. Another element is the importance of the type of of the partnership with the private sector. And another element or another, if you will, conditions that need to be minimally met for entrepreneurship and innovation to accelerate the implementation of the SDG is learning and development. Particularly, certainly in countries that I'm aware of, the teaching of entrepreneurial skills at all levels of education. Sometimes even imparting that failure is not necessarily a bad thing if you have done your best. Maybe it's a first attempt at learning. In Arabic, we say, he who tries and succeeds gets 2 points. He who genuinely tries and doesn't succeed still get 1 point. Perhaps one element that has been common is to leave no one behind. And I think the question that was asked by Dr. Danieli, particularly in post-conflict context, where people by necessity are entrepreneurs and they have the ideas. Some are involved in entrepreneurship out of opportunity, but mostly. And we tend to forget the victims and those who have suffered from conflict, that they are potential entrepreneurs. Perhaps last but not least is the access to information, access to services that promote financial literacy, particularly for women and youth, because if you know where the information is, then that is a further empowerment. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of our meeting, so please join me in thanking our